Hi, I'm Drew, and I'm an amateur model builder. I'm building a layout in my basement called the White River Line, inspired by the Frisco Railroad in the Ozarks. It's a bit overdue, but in this episode, I'm going to be weathering this covered hopper for my 2K giveaway winner. I announced the winner over a month ago, but I've been a bit distracted with the holidays and some other work on my layout and such, so I'm just now getting around to it. It's been over a year since I've done any weathering on rolling stock, so I might be a little bit out of practice, but I'm sure it'll come back to me. Well, let's jump on into it. To begin, I removed the trucks and the couplers from the bottom of the hopper and set them aside. I found a few prototype pics on the Frisco.org website and settled on this one to base my weathering on. It was the only one I could find that was a similar model of car. I'm not going to attempt to match it exactly, it'll just be some inspiration. I took the car upstairs to the kitchen sink and gently cleaned it with some mild soapy water to remove any dust on it. Then I set it to dry overnight. The first thing I need to do is fix the paint color. The gray I applied years ago is really too dark. I mixed some Vallejo light gray with just a bit of dark gray. I don't know the exact color the Frisco used, but I think this is close enough. Before adding the decals, I wanted to add the ACI label shown on my prototype. I masked off the area for the label. The only black I have is Vallejo Air, which is a bit thinner than I like for brush painting. I put some on my palette and let it sit for a minute to thicken up. I've never really tried this before, so let's see how it works. My primary concern with the thin paint in this case is it bleeding under the masking. There's a bit of bleeding, but I can touch that up. There. Once I get some more weathering done, nobody will notice. The bars in the prototype picture appear to be yellow and orange, or maybe red. They're a little bit faded and grungy, and I'll use Vallejo buff and orange brown. You can purchase ACI label decals, but since I won't use them regularly, I didn't bother to. Next, I added a gloss clear coat in prep for adding decals. I used Pledge Revive It mixed 50-50 with 91% isopropyl alcohol. After the decal set, I did some light fading with sky gray. And some dark fading with dark gray. I then applied another gloss clear coat and prepped for a panel wash. For the panel wash, I used a Teeling 502 bitume mixed with odorless thinner, but it was a little browner than I wanted, so I added a bit of engine grease. This is still too brown, but it's what I've got. I guess I need to pick something else up. After letting this dry for about 20 minutes, I went back with a dry brush and softened the edges. In some cases, the brush wasn't enough, so I used a Q-tip. After letting the oil paint cure overnight, I added a satin clear coat. I used 1 part Tamiya X21 mixed with 10 parts Revive It. Then I mixed that whole thing 50-50 with isopropyl alcohol. Now it's time for some chipping. I used a bit of sponge and applied Vallejo German Black Brown, Dark Rust, and Light Rust. A light hand is needed when using the light rust. It can be pretty bright, and it's easy to overdo. Next, I added some light and dark rust washes, also from Vallejo. I mixed these with a bit of isopropyl alcohol to cut the surface tension. This process is a bit interpretive or extemporaneous. I just play around until it looks right to me. I did add a bit more dark rust to spots to fill in the sponge chipping. In my opinion, the hardest part of rust and chipping is knowing when to stop and not overdo it. And I think this is about right. Next, I'm going to tackle the part that I'm most worried about, this grimy mottled stuff. I'm going to start with an oil wash of engine grease and a little bit of dark rust to warm it up. "20 or 30 minutes after applying the wash, I came back and softened it out with a dry brush. I wasn't quite happy with the result, so I stippled on a little bit of oil paint directly. And again, I waited for it to dry and softened it. This still isn't quite what I want, but I've got a plan. I did the different sides of the car in stages. I want the side of the car to lay flat as it dries. After finishing this wash process, I applied a matte finish. This time I used Vallejo matte varnish. My next stage in trying to get that mottled, grimy look on the prototype was to stipple and dry brush with a bit of gray green. This still isn't exactly what I would like, but I think it's pretty close. I then applied a couple more decals. The consolidated stencil on my prototype looks quite clean and new, so I chose to add these after doing the weathering. I still have a couple more steps to finish the car body using some weathering pigments. I'm going to be using some rust pigments and a gray and white pigment. First, I'm going to add a bit of rust here on the walkway on the top, and a little bit to the chutes on the bottom. I'm also going to add a bit of white and this light gray pigments to the tops and sides and the bottoms to simulate cement. The last time I did that, I got some feedback that I really didn't quite add enough, that these cement cars get quite junked up. So I used a little bit heavier hand this time. Hopefully I didn't overdo it. I applied a matte varnish to set the pigments. Unfortunately, this process always seems to make the pigments disappear, well, and blows some of them off. So I reapplied the pigment while the varnish was wet and resprayed varnish over it. Well, I've run out of time to get this video out the door, and I still have the trucks and wheels left to do. It's wrestling season, and I've spent most of my Saturdays for the last month and a half at tournaments with my youngest. I guess you'll just have to watch one of my other weathering videos to see how I paint the wheels of trucks. I'll be sure to post a picture of the final product on Facebook and Instagram before I ship it off to the winner. You can find the links to my social media accounts below, along with a list of tools, supplies, and resources I use. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave me a like. It's the easiest way to support my channel. Subscribing is even better. If you want to support me further, you can find links to my Amazon wishlist and merch below. In my next video, I'm going to be working on the lumberyard a bit more. So, please join me again next time as I continue modeling the White River Line.